First things first. Okay, well, thank you, everybody, for coming. I'm Ann Schaefer, and I'm with the Coastal Watershed Institute, and I have just a little preamble for Curt and the audience before we get started. Thank you all for coming, and again, for your patience as we move to this. We didn't expect this turnout. I do have some caveats that we need to make clear. We are recording this, but it's for nonprofit. Actually, we had a request from NOAA in DC, so we're going to simulcast it and make it available for NOAA. But this is a not-for-profit effort. All of us that are here tonight are here as volunteers, including Curt. And so if for any reason you use any of the materials from tonight, you can't use them for profit. And we have been asking for a donation. I think hopefully all of you know. And just so you know that those funds go to Curt for the Beach Watchers Alert, as well as to the Coastal Watershed Institute. And let's see, so to make sure you know that tonight's presentation is solely possible because of Curt and largely the Surfrider Foundation, who sponsored, along with the U.S. Coast Guard, a cleanup of Cape B, which many of you may be familiar with. And some of the materials from that effort, the highlights of today, are here, and Curt can give you the details for his work on that cleanup. But we definitely want to acknowledge the Beach Watcher Alert, Coastal Watershed Institute, the organization I'm with, Surfrider Foundation, the MRC a little bit, and then also the Coast Guard. And of course, Peninsula College. Could I please have a round of applause for Peninsula College? So, thank you. I just wanted to give you a heads up on the Coastal Watershed Institute. We're a nonprofit, a 501c3. We were formed in 1996, and our sole motivation is to bring senior scientists, such as Curt, together with college students and citizens, and bring those three together to promote science that helps us manage and promote the ecosystems that have brought us all here. And so we have a number of projects that we're involved with, many of which hopefully you're familiar with. We coordinate the Elwha Nearshore Consortium. How many of you are familiar with the Nearshore Consortium in particular? Not that many. Okay, well, we're going to have to step it up then. Okay, it's a good organization, and you can ask me questions about it later if you're interested. We also have a nearshore restoration and monitoring plan for the Elwha that we're implementing. Helly Anderson is in charge of a study looking at the macroinvertebrate communities of the Elwha nearshore. Sam Rich is a graduate student with the University of Illinois we're working with on large woody debris mapping for the Elwha nearshore. We also are helping Dave Parks with his work looking at sediment characterization in the nearshore. Then I am working on a project that focuses on fish use and the Elwha estuary restoration and monitoring. We also are involved with Twins nearshore restoration, and then spinning up work on nearshore habitat ecosystem function recovery for forage fish and salmonids. So if you're interested in more information or you want to get involved, here are our contact information for the Coastal Watershed Institute and also for Curt's organization, the Beachcombers Alert. And those addresses will be available later on as well. So off to our talk, and of course, having my notes. So tonight we're here we're fortunate enough to have Curt Ebbesmeyer, who's in town again for a beach cleanup investigation. Curt holds a doctorate in oceanography from the University of Washington and has made a science of beachcombing. And Curt is one of the experts that is used worldwide that folks turn to for understanding and monitoring our ocean environment. And tonight he's going to provide an overview of what marine debris can tell us and an update relating to the work on the tsunami disaster. So Curt has spent his entire 40-year career studying ocean currents, and that included working for the Mobil Corporation, where he was tracking icebergs in the Grand Banks. And then Curt was also an oceanographer with Evans Hamilton. And let's see. Oh, and then also Curt was involved with the Valdez oil spill. That's actually one of the places that we worked together. And today Curt presides over a network of beachcombers who walk beaches all over the world, report their findings to Curt, and then he studies the information, thinks about what it means, compiles the information into a newsletter, which is the Beachcombers Alert. And we have copies of that newsletter out on the front table. Make sure you get a copy, and if you're interested in getting on the newsletter, there are envelopes there to do that. And then also tonight is with us is Jim Ingraham. And Jim is a retired NOAA scientist and worked for NOAA for 40 years, is that correct? And worked all over basically the Pacific, it looks like. Jim in particular is noteworthy in that he developed the OSCURS model, which is the acronym for the Ocean Surface Current Simulator. And this is the model that Curt will be presenting some of the results of tonight. It's a fascinating piece of work. And today, Jim is working with Curt and consulting for Drift Busters. So I think with that, here again are the contact information. And I think now we're ready for Curt. So let's see. And you know how it goes? All right.
I think I do.
Are you going to hold the mic?
Yes.
Okay. And here's a pointer. Oh, you have yours as well. Here's a backup one if you need it.
Find it? There it is. Slideshow. Oops. Slideshow. There. From beginning. Yeah.
Very good.
Thanks, Jim. Okay.
I want to welcome you again and thank you for turning out. Excuse me. That buoy over there is maybe the first arrival of the tsunami, so you might want to... Contaminated. Yes, right. We haven't checked the radioactivity, which we'll come to. Without Jim, this work is not possible, because Jim has the only model on the planet that actually tracks debris exposed to both winds and currents. So an object like this has a water line about here, and Jim has figured out over a 40-year period how the winds blow it and how the currents drag it. The people that do global warming have models, but they just look at water. And that's what you read about, and that's what you see in the media about the debris field. They're looking at where the water is going to be. And the water will be here in a couple of years. But the winds, and the water moves about 7 miles a day, but the winds can push an object like this at 20 miles a day, 3 times faster than water. That's not rocket science. Everybody knows if you're in a Boston whaler and you're drifting along, the winds are going to push you along. So that's very, very simple. But it's been, the media can't seem to get the idea through their head. So this one was found by the surf riders and the CWI and so forth, and we had it turned up this morning. And these apparently are coming ashore in some numbers now. So look at that, and when you're on the beach, report those guys, because they could be renamed tsunami buoys.
Where did they find it?
It was found up at, what was the name of that beach?
Cape B.
Cape B.
It was pulled off the beach, I think 2 weeks ago, and then Curt and a fleet of students went through and sorted all the material today, and so they found it today in the sort. But it was pulled off the beach by the Coast Guard and the surf rider 2 weeks ago, and that's Cape B out at Niamey.
I'll show you others. This is just one of probably a dozen that have washed up in 2 weeks.
Has the origin of the buoy been established?
No, that's why it's speculative. But Jim's model, I'll come to that, shows that objects like this should be here now. We'll get to that.
What cape was it found on?
It's at Nia Bay. It's a beach just east of Nia Bay.
Right. I'll show you some more. That particular date, over the last 2 weeks, we'll talk about, I have slides that show these things. Next slide. Here's Jim. This is coming up in the 20th anniversary of the tub toy spill. One container full of 29,000 turtle ducks, beavers, and frogs. And many of my friends said, well, they'll disintegrate in a year. And the company that made them, the Floaty Products, sent me a case, and I put them in the pool, and Jim and I had a little fun. And after 20 years, they're still washing up in pristine condition. It's just a commentary on how plastic can last.
We had to pool our knowledge.
Oh. Well, you know how in technical manuscripts there's always footnotes. Next. Let's see. Here's where the earthquake happened off Japan. I'll refer to this sometimes as a tsunami coast. Some other people call it the north coast of Japan. I believe it's something on the order of 400 miles. It's comparable to the length of the Washington state coastline. 20,000 people died, or missing. No, I don't think anybody knows yet how many people actually died. Next, Jim. This is the tsunami. Now, when there's an earthquake, you probably all know that the ground on the seafloor shifts, and it causes the whole water column, in this case, say 10,000 feet, to go up and down, which is a lot of water, and it causes a wave to move off, and that's called a tsunami. The tsunami reached the coast of Japan in about 10 or 15 minutes, but it came across the Pacific and hit our coast in about 9 hours. These are the tsunami travel times from NOAA. They have a very, very fine tsunami wave model. And here's 3 hours, 6 hours, 9 hours, and 12 hours. And if you do the math, when I flew to Tokyo quite a few years ago from Seattle, it takes about 10 hours to get to Narita. That's about how long it took the tsunami to get from Japan to here. So it's about 500, 600 miles an hour. It's a wave in the deep ocean. It's only about this high. But when it crashes into the coast, it can get up to 100 feet high. So that's, now I'll show you next slide, Jim. That wave slammed into California, and it was a young man and his some friends went down to photograph the tsunami. And the first one wasn't the big one, so they got down too close. The second one was bigger and grabbed him. Native American, 25 years old. His friends went to grab him and missed him. He fell in the water on the day of the tsunami, March 11th, and in about 3 weeks wound up at the mouth of the Columbia River. The only thing identifiable was his teeth. So that's the first tsunami victim in North America since 1964, the big Alaskan earthquake. So the point is that there were tsunami victims both in North America and Japan. And this is Jim's simulation of where the body drifted. I work with a lot of medical examiners, and believe it or not, we had a criminology conference last year, and we had 400 people from around the world interested only in drifting human remains. So this is the big deal. Next. Here's a picture of the tsunami coming into, I don't know the name, but look at the crest. And here's about a 10-story building. Kind of reminded me of Seattle. I kind of like this because it felt like home. It's already coming over what would have been the viaduct, but I guess we've solved that problem. So it just kind of gives you a scale. When a tsunami hits the coast, you can get a 100-foot wave. But the trouble is, a wave like this doesn't just stop here. It can go in up to 5 miles inland. Next. When the wave comes into shore, of course, goes over the land, but then the wave recedes, and it takes with them all kinds of people. This is a very poor picture, but there's an island of debris and a gentleman who probably was never rescued. I've seen on NHK TV houses drifting out to sea full of people, and they were waving, and the people on the freeway overpass just waved back, and nothing they could do. So I'll show you some drifting houses in a minute. Next. There were just incredible debris. These are 400-foot vessels. I wouldn't be surprised if a few of them are out there drifting now. Next. Now what's interesting, people often ask, well, what should we expect? And I always say, well, expect the unexpected, because we really do not know what floats on the ocean. For example, cars. Well, I don't think a whole car is going to float. But as the tsunami went way inland, it shred a whole bunch of cars, and wheels float very well. Many, many wheels wash up. Now, aircraft, the gasoline bladders are in the wings, so I wouldn't be surprised if we got wings washing up. Now, of course, aircraft are very traceable, so if you see an aircraft wing in the surf, get the number. I'm not sure that it'd be worth very much, but to some Japanese family who might have lost the plane and a loved one with it, you are going to make friends for life. And that's another thing that I want to emphasize, is that all the debris that comes ashore needs to be treated with great reverence and respect. Because there are people over in Japan who want to know about all this. I'll give you some stories in a minute, but if you report something that is traceable, you will probably have the loved ones come over and want to stay with you for a while. It's wonderful. This happened before, and it's going to happen hundreds of times in the next coming few years. Next. Oh, here is the steamship Pallada. It's a research vessel that happened to be on its way from one of the Hawaiian Islands over to Hokkaido. And it saw debris here, and it saw the main mass of debris here, and this is last September. And what you're looking at in purple is the University of Hawaii, their simulation as to where low windage debris would be. Very fine work. Now what I wanted to show you is a picture from here. Here's Midway Island, which is, as it says, halfway across the Pacific to North America. Here's Honolulu down here. Now watch the next slide. Now, this is an island of debris that's probably 200, 300, 400 feet across. Here's an overturned vessel by the name of Fukushima, which happens to have the name of the reactors. We don't know Fukushima is a fairly common name, so I wouldn't make the connection to reactors. This is the roof of a house. There's another overturned boat here, probably 12 feet long or so. Here's the crown of a whole house. Notice all the wood. And then notice up in here, these strange black objects. And next, when you blow that part up, they look like this. They look kind of like this buoy. And here is a buoy like this one that was found at La Push a few weeks ago. Now see these white ones? Those look strangely like the drift net buoys that are, drift nets are like 40 miles long, and they have the little banana floats, and about every mile they have these large buoys. So it may be that we're seeing this was found at Ocean Shores a few weeks ago. And John Anderson, I'm not sure if John's here tonight, but he says that these are coming in now in some numbers. So it's kind of a working hypothesis that these buoys are like these, or like this, and they're coming in, and they're high windage, and they seem to conform to Jim's model, which said that debris like this should have arrived October 31st. Next. Here is today. This is the buoy that was on the podium here. This was found by the surf riders and Coast Guard, and here is the debris that we were looking through today. We had 11 people sorting 50 bags of trash, and we found this one thing here plus quite a bit of other debris. But if you see something like this, report it. If you see anything that might stick out of the water and sail with the wind, please report it.
What about picking it up and taking it?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
What about picking it up and taking it?
That's a question. I still worry about radioactivity. I'm an old engineer. I always believe in prudence. If I had a Geiger counter, I would have checked it. But it hasn't been checked. So I'm urging people when they find things, call the police and have it checked for radioactivity. But unfortunately, the police and other authorities, I do not think, are prepared at this point. So if you all have access to Geiger counters, you might start thinking about it. I'd like to have that one tested. Is there a Geiger counter in the audience? I don't think they're too expensive, but I could be corrected.
They're not selling them sensitive enough to do that.
Oh, okay. So we need to figure that out. There's a dimension. I'm not too worried about, well, radioactivity does not want to be talked about in the media, but I always bring it up. And the media type, they say, well, you don't want to talk about that. I said, yes, I do. Because everybody that I know, all the beachcombers I know, want to know. And I want the authorities to deal with it. So we'll get to that in an action plan. I think every community should have one. Maybe more. Next. This is a computer animation by Dave Ingraham of how the North Pacific works. The currents go around in great gyres, just circles. This was Aleut gyre, goes around in 3 years. This is turtle gyre, goes around every 6 years. Here's Japan. Here's the Tsunami coast right here. We're over here. Here's the Great Garbage Patch, which is something 3 times the size of Texas. It's just full of garbage. It's a planetary dust bunny. The closest analogy that makes it real to me is of the dust bunnies in my home. My wife is coming up on a 3rd joint replacement. We don't vacuum much anymore. But I do notice there's something always to be learned from difficulties. And I notice where the dust bunnies accumulate. And they're just dust bunnies. But I can pick them up and put them in the trash. Now there's 8 of these on the planet, and they total an area probably 3 times the size of the United States. There's nobody around on this planet that can pick them up. And they're so diffuse that even if you go out there and you see miles and miles and miles of debris, it'd be like taking a lawnmower and mowing Texas. It isn't going to happen. So the debris, the way I think about the debris is that you've probably got maybe 100 million tons of debris. It's spread over the size of the state of California out in this area. And people say, well, where's it going to go? Well, here's my working hypothesis. It's going to go 4 places, and we'll get into it in a minute. But about a quarter of it's going to get to North America. Maybe a quarter of it will go back to Japan. Maybe a quarter of it will go into the garbage patch. And maybe a quarter of it will sink. And you say, well, we shouldn't worry about a quarter. I said, well, a quarter of infinity is still a big number. We're dealing with hundreds of millions of tons of debris, so 25% of that could be catastrophic to some harbors if this stuff comes in and just blocks the harbor. I've already heard that some shipping routes are being routed around the tsunami debris, so there's a lot going on. And I only know a little bit, so try to get down to the facts. These are the facts as I know it. Next. OSCURS, this is Jim's life work. Now, stands for Ocean Surface Current Simulator, as Ann said. It's been verified with many historical flotsam. That's why I wouldn't be here tonight if it wasn't for how much I trust this model. And I'll show you that in a little bit. And it uses U.S. daily U.S. Navy weather data. Bless their hearts, the Navy actually shares the data with us. That they every 12 hours they put out a grid of pressures around the planet, and Jim converts them into winds and currents. And every day he can move flotsam around the planet, but he's focused on the North Pacific because he can only handle by himself one ocean. If there's PhDs out here or people who want to actually do another ocean, well, step up. The Atlantic cries out. The Indian Ocean, the Antarctic. It's taken 40 years to get to a point where we actually trust a model for an ocean. Next. Now, the ocean is a rough place. Here's like a moderate wave, maybe 60 foot. You see this tanker here? You have this like a hand of God coming over. You get waves like that, 60-foot wave. Now that'll terrify you. I've only been in waves up to 40 feet. I've only been in ships that heeled over about 20 or 30 degrees. Next. You get container ships like this. I happen to have the privilege of interviewing a container ship captain for 4 hours after he had pulled in to the port of Tacoma, and he had lost a toy shipment a long time ago. I said, Captain, when do you lose containers? He says, oh, fairly often. Well, when? We were standing on the bridge, and if you've ever seen an inclinometer, when the ship goes over to the side, the inclinometer kind of reflects how far over it's gone. I said, well, this inclinometer here, I know what those are. I said, when do containers go overboard? Oh, 55 degrees. Now that, I said, well, what is 55 degrees? He says, oh, it's when the bridge goes into the water. Now that gets your attention. And that will, in that particular episode, the whole crew went down to the engine room and just closed the door and waited. Because when you get to 55 degrees, a ship will turn turtle and you're gone. I think 63 degrees is about the limit that I've heard. Next. Oh, here's another container ship. Notice the containers in the back. It's caught on a reef in New Zealand. See, it's lost containers. Now, that's not too bad. See the bridges here? That's a moderate catastrophe. I've heard of a ship that went from 63 degrees one way to 55 degrees the next way in about 10 seconds.
Oof.
It lost a whole ship, 64 containers just popped off the top. And you may ask, well, why does this happen? Well, the container industry likes to ship containers and they like to stack them high because each one of those containers is worth $5 grand from here to Japan. It only takes $100 million to build a ship. You got 5,000 containers at $5,000 a piece. You got 25 million. It doesn't take many crossings to pay for a ship. And so the big money is to stack them high. When you stack them high, the ships get tipsy. And that's what happens. And that's why, next slide. That's why you lose containers. And my mother, in 1990, there were thousands of shoes washing up, Nike shoes washing up, and she says, when she was alive, I'd have lunch with her, and she would say, "Is this what you do?" And it was in the newspaper, the PI. And what you do? All these shoes washing up? I said, Well, I looked into it before I knew I was working with the Nike company, and each container has, each shoe has an individual number. It's like a message in a bottle, only a shoe. So I began tracking each shoe, and it became really first-rate oceanography. And we published it in a learned journal, and I said, well, my job is done. No. I put it in the journal, and the next day I had media calls, 20, just incessant for months. The media just loved the story. So I said, well, I can reach people this way. Well, I can teach about containers, so that's what I did. 2 years later, we had these toys spilled. See the water line? Shoes have soles, and their soles point heavenward. Could be a model for us. Now the toy, see how the toy floats on the water? The wind will just sail this little toy along really well, and the wind will blow over the shoe and sort of slide over the sole. So there's kind of all kinds of philosophical metaphors that this brings to mind, but we won't go there. Next. This is the Nike shoe. There were 80,000 spilled here in 1990, and here's Jim's computer simulation, and here's where they washed up. First arrivals were right where he predicted. This is a blind test. I did not give him the answer. I told him where and when. I didn't give him this data. I said, fax me the answer. And he faxed it back in an hour, blind test. And this is exactly what the blind test gave. I said, okay, we'll publish it. That's it. Perfect blind test. Next. Here are the tub toys. 29,000 lost in one container. 1992. Next. They were spilled right there. Here's Hokkaido. Notice this is Aleut Gyre. And you'll notice these are container spills. Nike sandals, Nike high tops and other shoes, tub toys. The container ships go right along that where the two gyres meet. And that's where the Flotsam goes overboard, and here's where the toys were found. Just incredible accuracy from this wonderful model. Next. This is hockey gloves, 1994. In the 90s, we were getting a major container spill of interest every 2 years. And my dad had Parkinson's disease, and he noticed that I wasn't doing much anything else except chasing junk on the ocean. And I was talking to the media all the time. He said, well, you need a newsletter. I said, oh, well, that's a lot of work. I don't want to do that. I got to earn a living. Okay. My mother says, well, if you write it, I'll mail it. And then Dad's physical therapist, Jim White, he said, well, if you write it, I'll put it in PageMaker. And I said, before I knew it, I was in the corner, and we had a newsletter. And that's what you have. And this is the 16th year of our newsletter. And it's Jim White, Jim Ingraham. My mom used to handwrite all the labels. She's no longer around. And it just keeps going. People, like, it used to be a newsletter for Elvis Presley, but it ran out of news because he was dead. There is so much flotsam and so much stuff on the ocean that's virtually unexplored that it just never stops. I've got 5 words already written, and I could write one every month, but I couldn't afford the postage. This is me. There were 34,000 hockey gloves here. Here's the tuna fleet. The tuna fleet was seeing hockey gloves here. Jim said they should be here, so he made a slight adjustment and predicted they should arrive there. I was in my office on a Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock, and he faxed me over the answer. Here they are. I said, well, I haven't got any reports. Thank you. Hung up the phone. 5 minutes later, Alex Wassell on Vancouver Island said, well, I got 60 hockey gloves right there. Oh, 50 right there. Wow. Now, a hockey glove really floats with its forefinger out of the water. Sort of like that movie, the guy nailed to a log. Anyway, it makes him sail along, and it was perfect. A high windage object. Now we're starting to really get confidence that this model works for things that catch the wind. Next. Now we come to really interesting. This is Kathy Klee, and she's standing next to a buoy. And if you translate this, it's Ginoza, which is a small village on Okinawa. Now, why should you care about this buoy? Well, that buoy was blown across the ocean in 8 months. Now, you remember the tsunami was in March? You add 8 months to March and you get November. It's not rocket science. This is a high windage object. You see the water line right there? All of this was sticking above the water. And so I was down at Ocean Shores giving this talk, and I hadn't realized the obvious. 8 months. It's now. I said, Jim, why don't you model this buoy drift? Well, we already done that a while ago. Next slide. Here is Jim's simulation of the buoy. Landed at Copalis after 9 months. So we actually figured out, hey, the model works for something really big and really sails with the wind. So, well, that works. That really worked. Well, if in 8 months a buoy like that could come across, what happens if we had objects like that along the Tsunami coast? So when we got back from Ocean Shores, next, Jim put into OSCURS, he put in 6 of those buoys, hypothetical now, and said where would they be in October 31st, because we just had gotten the data from the U.S. Navy. As of October 31st, with real data, the buoys were up here, from Washington State all the way up into Alaska. And so I've been, in the last 2 weeks, I've done 20 major media events saying, oh, well, they're here now. Big stuff. Well, what do you mean? Senator Murray said it's not for another year or two. I said, they're listening to government agencies that work with water, not flotsam. But it's hard to get through that the winds will actually blow flotsam 3 times faster than water. So this is where the low windage debris is. It's about halfway across. So in the media, you'll see low windage stuff reported, and oh, don't worry, it'll be here in a year or 2. I'm here to tell you that the high windage stuff, like this buoy, I think they're here now. Okay, so I'm wrong. Well, let's get ready. Because this is the beginning of what's going to happen. Don't wait for 2 years to get ready, when it'll be on you. Get ready now, when the stuff like these buoys are coming to shore, as a warning. You know, Mother Nature gives us warnings. She warns about global nature. She warns and she warns, and all of a sudden, she's finished warning and we're toast. And I think she's kind of getting irritated with us. Next. So here's some Flotsam Destinations. North America, garbage patch, return to Japan. I'll leave out the sinking because nobody knows. And OSCURS doesn't work. Okay, next. Flotsam to North America. Next. These are Transpacific shipwrecks in the 1800s. Here's Japan, North America. Each one of these triangles is a derelict Japanese fishing vessel that was sighted and recovered by a whaling captain. These date from about 1850s to about 1872. See how they're coming right across? See them all the way over here? That's where a lot of the tsunami debris is going to go. They're down here in Acapulco, they're back in Hawaii, and some of them have come back to Japan. This is published by an eminent scientist, George Davidson, after whose named the Davidson Current, in 1872. This is not new. Fishing vessels are big debris items. There's probably quite a few of them coming our way from this tsunami. This is not rocket science. Next. The Japanese survey with plastic survey stakes. This is a wooden one they come right across, and a lot of them carry the name of the prefecture. So that tsunami wave that went all the way inland, we're probably going to carry over an awful lot of these survey stakes to us. So if you see a survey stake, I hope you can check it for radioactivity, but have it translated. I have a translator. If you send it to flotsametrics.com, I can get it translated pretty quick. Next. To the garbage patch. Here is Jim Ingram's simulation of Japanese glass fishing floats. They don't sail too fast ahead of the wind, but they catch the wind a little bit. Here's where they started, about 10 of them. After 1 year, they're halfway across. After 3 years, they're into the garbage patch. And after 10 years, they're mostly in the garbage patch, and some have come back to Japan. But notice that none got to North America. Now that's a possibility that most of the debris might just go into the garbage patch and double its size. We just don't know. Next. Drift around the Gyre. I correspond with all kinds of beachcombers, and one of them was Buzzy Trent, famous one of the early big wave riders in Hawaii. Next. Buzzy liked to surf waves like this. See the surfboard here? Surfers out in the audience can tell me probably better, but it's probably a 30-foot wave. Well, Buzzy, back in the 70s, had his own personal board shaper, and he had his own personal style, and he had his favorite board made, and he loved to smoke cigars, and he had the cigar band etched into the surfboard, and he signed it, and he went out one day to get a wave like this, and he had this giant wipeout, and it just blew him into shore, but he wanted his board. And he went back out on another board, but could never find his favorite board. And he wrote me a letter and said, "Guess what, Curt? I found my board." I said, "Well, that's fine, Buzzy, but where is it?" He says, "Oh, it's one island up, but it's 6 years later." The board was just toast on top and had seaweed dangling from it, but it was his board because you could make out his signature, and the cigar label was all there. Next, so as soon as I got that letter from Buzzy, I asked Jim, I said, "Well, here's the Wipeout. Where did the board go?" Well, this is went up here, past the Tsunami coast, interestingly. So maybe we'll get a surfboard that's radioactive, I don't know. And then it came across almost to Oregon. Look how close, maybe 100 miles. And it, like a lot of Flotsam does, it gets close and then headed back, and it wound up in the Hawaiian Islands. It's a beautiful example of how long objects take to go around. And a lot of the flotsam from the tsunami is just going to do this, just like Buzzy's board. The story of that board, by the way, is in Flotsametrics outside. Inland from the Pacific. So the debris isn't going to come just to the coast. It's going to come all the way inland here. Next. So I want to talk to you about the stuff that comes in through the Strait of Juan to Fuca. We've already found Nike sneakers at the head of the strait in Discovery Bay. Tub toys were found up in Bellingham. These are toys that are lost in the middle of the Pacific, come all the way in. These are Nike shoes that come all the way in. Now what I want to show you is the steamship Pacific, which was lost off the coast about maybe 20 miles out. So where did the debris go? Most of that debris came right inland, and it's in the newspaper. So I spent a couple of months going through every newspaper because I wanted to know where the debris went. Next. I'll show you the feet in a minute. Somebody's awake. Okay, that's real cool. That's cool. I can't tell you how many audiences I put to sleep. So we have the steamship Pacific, 300 foot, 300 people on board that are known, lots of gold. All kinds of gold hunters call me and say, "Well, can you help us find it?" I said, "No, I don't like gold seekers. They never share their data. Let alone the gold." We have a gentleman from Williamson who helped find the ship of gold, and I'm not sure Mike ever got any money. Anyway, here is a map from all the newspapers. I think the collision was out here someday. The Orpheus was a clipper ship, beautiful. I think 3-masted clipper ship. They collided right here. Everybody but 2 people drowned of the 300 from the steamship Pacific. And here are where all the bodies and debris were found. Mostly up here around Victoria. And you'll see here's Port Angeles, Freshwater Bay, Dungeness Spit, all the way into Port Townsend. That's real data. Some of the steamship Pacific started right out of Victoria. She went out here about 12 hours later. She sank, and a lot of the bodies washed back a week later to loved ones. It's the worst marine disaster in our state's history, and yet it hardly gets any press. I think that's what's going to happen to a big oil spill out here. But I can't get it. Nobody in the government will want to listen to that. It's too rare an occurrence. I said, no, it's not. We get all kinds of debris always washing in. So this is going to happen. Now let's talk about the feet. See, this is the dust and body feet, and I work with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and death investigators. And one day I got 14 calls from countries, media around the world. What about these feet? You have a serial chainsaw massacre murder. Other countries couldn't believe this was happening. I said, no, This is nothing unusual. What do you mean? You have all these kind of murders out there? We've got a lot of them. I said, no. I said, there's 2,400 people missing in British Columbia. 2,400. We're only dealing with maybe maximum 8 people. What happens to a body when it floats? Some of those missing people went in the water. So what happens to a body? It comes apart of the joints. There's nothing magic about it. So you look at your body. Oh, like right here. There's a body. And it's got sneakers on it. Okay? After about 6 months in the water, the body's all gone, but the sneakers are there. Because the sneakers will float. Whatever is going to remain from human remains will be what's encased in flotation devices. And sneakers are one of the best flotation devices around. So if you want to leave something for your loved ones and you're out in the ocean a lot, wear sneakers. Now, it only took about $5 million for the RCMPs to trace the DNA from about 7 people to 4 people, 7 shoes to 4 people. That's expensive work. And the reason they did it was the media was just been hounding them forever. So I was down at the Japanese consulate last Monday trying to wake up the Japanese, and I said, you lost 20,000 people, right? I said, well, what happens if you get 100 sneakers with feet in them? Well, that can't happen. I said, I'm here to tell you, it can happen. It's going to cost you about $1 million in DNA research and everything to trace each one. Multiply 100 times, $1 million, and you've got a bill. Well, that won't happen. That won't happen. I said, okay, fine, call me when you're ready. Human remains happen. I can't tell you how many human people walk by them on the beach, and they say, oh, it was just a bone on the beach. Yeah, but it might have been the jawbone of somebody who really cared. It happens. Next. So where's all this stuff really going to go? Well, after half a century, the ocean is going to grind it up and into the food chain. Next. Most of it's going to go into great gyres. There's 11 great gyres on the planet, and there's 8 great garbage patches. Next. This is how the planet really looks. These gold are garbage patches. Here's Africa, South America, North America, Asia. Here's Japan over here. Here's the great garbage patch. Here's another garbage patch. Here's the higher dog patch. There's 2 garbage patches here. Indian Ocean, South Atlantic. Those are the planetary dust bunnies.
So they're kind of trapped in the...
They're trapped below high pressure cells. There's nothing magic about it. If you read the Ancient Mariners knew about this stuff. It's just modern scientists don't study the surface. They just do not see the sea surface. So we know virtually nothing about these garbage patches. Next. So after a while, all that tsunami stuff is going to be ground up into confetti, plastic confetti. And we say, well, so what? It's about the size of your thumbnail. What's going to happen? Well, this is how it looks compressed near the south shore of the Big Island, where I like to camp. And if you ever get a chance to go to the Big Island, camp at Junk Beach. When it was first discovered or first made famous, it was 16 feet of plastic for 2 miles. I'm here to tell you, it's very interesting to camp there. Now they keep it down to about a foot thick because it's cleaned up about 2 or 3 times a year because it's just too embarrassing to be next to a federal reserve and have all this plastic called Junk Beach. They said, oh, no, it's called Camilo. I said, I'm sorry, the horse is out of the barn. Okay. So what happens? Next. Well, here's an albatross. They get to have wingspans of 12 feet. And how do they think they live? They fly across the ocean, and they've actually tagged some of these birds, and they can stay aloft for a complete circumnavigation of Antarctica. Never landing, always just pecking. Here's one that was tracked from San Francisco over the Great Garbage Patch and out. I like her attitude. Next. Here's a chick that a mother like that was feeding. It's a chick that died at Midway Island in this condition. David Lichwater made this beautiful just heart-rending photograph. Poor little chick had 512 pieces of flotsam inside. Next. It looked like this is what was inside. The gliders. There's a piece here that says BP 101. That was traced to a PBY 1944 crashed off the Philippines. So I was working with National Geographic, and they said, "Well, what is this?" I said, "Well, it's a piece of aircraft debris." "Well, it's 60 years old. Where has it been?" I said, "Well, it's probably been floating for 60 years. "Well, it's probably just laid in the beach." I said, "No, I'll ask Jim." So Jim has his OSCURS. Poor Jim.
Oh,
And so he ran OSCURS for 60 years, day by day, and we were hoping that it would just go park itself. No. Here's a blow-up of it. BP 101 is the call sign of the squadron of PBYs out of that area. Next. Here's where Jim started it. 60 years. Why do I show you that? Well, I think the tsunami debris is going to be around for 60 years.
How long did it take you to run that simulation?
The question is, how long did it take you to run that?
Yeah, a couple hours.
So but this is a world-class model. I mean, you're talking about something that's, well, I was studying flotsam. Jim was making this work for salmon, and I called him up one day and said, "Well, take off the flippers and make it flotsam. We have a model for flotsam, right? You can do your fish, but just run flotsam on the side." So that's what he does. So.
He thinks I was fishy.
So this is an example of 60 years. Next. Whales. This is a whale that washed up in West Seattle. Pretty good sized whale. Cascadia kindly shared this, and pretty good sized whale. Next. They did a necropsy. I think that's the right term. To me, human bodies and whales, they're both autopsies, so that's pretty interesting. Lady up on top. Next. This is the part, the stomach. Notice the plastic inside. The whales eat it. Birds eat it. Next. Now here's my talk is dedicated to my mom and my dad. Now here are the Nike shoes. Got me started. Wasn't for my mom, I wouldn't probably be here. Can't beat that. Dad had a part to do with it. But anyway, Mom was my clipping service. And she'd always clip out things about dead bodies and the things that caught her attention with the stuff that floated. And she really got me going. And Dad and I fished Ross Lake up in the Cascade Mountains for 30 years together, but he got Parkinson's and couldn't get there anymore. This is a Dolly Garden we caught together with his granddaughter, my daughter. And now Ross Lake is being invaded by little sardine-like creatures. And inside the fish, they're finding plastic. I work with a biologist up there out of fishing. I love Ross Lake. I love to eat the trout. Now every time I clean a trout up there, I look at the guts and I can find these little blue fibers. Where is this coming from? So my beloved fishing hole where I go with my buddies, plastic is everywhere. Next. Well, here's the plan for the debris arrival. 5 stages, and I would like to underline respect. These are mementos from a vast disaster with our Japanese friends. It all needs to be not treated as garbage or just simply debris. It needs to be treated with respect as if it were parts of your family that washed over there. So treat the debris as a crash scene. If you find something you think is from Japan, call the police and check for radioactivity. Remove the debris to safe sites in case there are mementos, like in the house I showed you. That needs to be, every crack and crevice needs to be looked for mementos. Japanese families are notorious for putting little things in between boards. Inspect the debris for mementos. notify loved ones in Japan. And, one more. This book out there is how, it's basically how a love story of my life grew into studying something we know virtually nothing about, the surface of the ocean. So, if it wasn't for my mother asking me questions, I would have never discovered how little we know, virtually nothing about the sea surface. Next. And we had a wonderful trash day. Here are Jim and myself. There's Arnold in here, and Ted. And 5 students from Barbara Blackie and college, from the Western Washington University and Peninsula College. We found all these drift net floats from the high seas drift nets, which were outlawed by the United Nations in 1992. We found 105 drift net floats, so why are they here? They were outlawed all those years ago. That's the most number I've seen for a long, long time. We also discovered, left and right, we found 30 pieces of footwear. 60% were left feet. So we're a blue state, so that makes sense. The other 40% were right shoes. So I find that worldwide. It's a fundamental problem in science. Why are left and right in the world? Why does a mother skate have a left and right delivery tube? Fundamental questions. It's a simple thing to do. We found so many. This is just a small fraction of the crab pot floats. We had 8 bags of plastic bottles and probably an equal volume of crab pot floats. So it woke me up to the fact that we have a lot of other debris besides plastic bottles out there that generate a lot of volume of plastic.
Which ones were the drift net floats?
All right, you see these little banana floats in here? We found yellow ones, blue ones, pink ones, white ones. We've sorted them by color because I think they have something to do with the way Japanese fish, but I don't know. They're very, very careful about what they put in the water where. So the drift nets are about 40 miles long. When you're putting out 40 miles, you probably want to know how many miles you have to go, both when you're putting the net out and when you're bringing it in. So I think there's a coding system. Here's one of those high seas drift net floats. I think about every 5 or 10 miles they put a big one. Here's a collar that you find on them sometimes. Here's the buoy that's up on the stage. We'll see if anybody starts glowing at night. Refrigerators. There seems to be a cargo spill, a container spill of these small refrigerators, but I haven't been able to find where they were lost. They're washing up from Kodiak all the way down to Oregon.
What kind of footwear?
All kinds. He's trying to bait me.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, because I want to be sure you don't flip-flop on your answers.
On that note, sour note, I hope there's no questions. So I'll take any question you have. I really appreciate you showing up tonight. This holiday season everybody's so busy, but this is such an immense event confronting us that, so have at it. Any question you have, I'll try.
Lights.
Yes, sir.
Nice talk. Really enjoyed it. Some years ago, you may be aware of this. There was an incident where a fisherman waded into the Aleut with his hip waders on, and then disappeared, left his things on the bank. They found him some period of time later around the corner on Vancouver Island.
I remember the case. I believe also that there were some students that released drift cards to simulate where the body might have gone elsewhere if it hadn't gone there. So, but I don't have those studies, and I wasn't able to get too far with the particulars. But
like an odd drift pattern.
no, actually, that's a fairly standard drift pattern. We've put out 40,000 drift cards in the Strait of Juan to Fuca over the last 30 years for various studies like Victoria Sewage and the Northern Tier Pipeline. You know, I have them all in my files, and I published papers on them. And you very often find that drift cars from the inner Strait of Juan to Fuca go right up around the corner and come ashore on Vancouver Island and up in Alaska. So that's a very standard pattern. So I thought it was an interesting case. But I wasn't able to pry into the medical records enough to get it to where I could publish it in the Journal of Forensic Science. So I would like to do that. If anybody has any particulars, the case could still be written up as a contribution in forensic oceanography.
Well, and that case is particularly important because of the connection with the Elwha. And there's a large gyre that's just off the mouth of the Elwha. So it really is a very maybe sad or heartbreaking illustration of the linkages between the riverine and the Strait of Juan de Fuca and the winds.
So if anybody would like to follow up, I'd be happy to do that. Yes, ma'am.
Every Earth Day, all the beaches along here, there's the cleanup, and all that stuff is taken to the transfer station, the dump. Nobody sorts it. Is there some way to get a project that do that?
The question is, what about our Earth Day when you have all the cleanup debris? Is there a way to...
Well, to sort out the Japanese material and report it to somebody.
Usually it just gets hauled off.
That's what I mean.
And it gets counted and weighed, but there's no information as to where it came from. And my view...
participated last year, and that's all they did.
It's very frustrating to me to collect all the garbage and not know where it came from. It'd be as if somebody threw a lot of garbage in my front yard and I didn't know who was doing this. I sit out on my front porch with a video camera, and you can bet that I would know who's doing this, and I would go after him. So,
and that's.
They take the plastic from Junk Beach in Hawaii. Where do they put it?
It's a very good question. In Junk Beach, what did they do with the Flotsam? Hawaii used to have a recycling program where they would turn the plastic waste into electricity. I've heard, I can't verify it, but I've heard that program's been discontinued. But if you've ever lit up a little pile of plastic, you know how much energy it generates. So there's potentially huge amounts of energy in plastic. I was told by a friend who was closely attuned to that, is when they burned it, you had to burn the fumes once and then burn those fumes again. So it's very, very hard to burn plastic in a clean way. So I'm hoping that there will be somebody who starts recycling plastic into gasoline.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
We do a coast walk on Cascadia Beach each month, and this first of December when we did ours, there was a lot of foreign labels like light plastic bottles, water bottles, things. Now you have big buoys like that. Do you have any idea of like if that's first, what's next? What are we going to look for in order? Are we going to look
That's a very good question. The beachcombers. The question is, most beachcombers know that when the winds start blowing on shore, flotsam comes ashore in a preferred order. If I can recite this right, there'll be the time when the light bulbs come ashore. There'll be a time when the by-the-wind sailors come ashore. There'll be a time when the glass balls come ashore. The people who really know the beach will say, aha, the by-the-wind sailors, I think, used to be first. And then light bulbs, and then glass balls. But there's a preferred order in which flotsam comes ashore. Now, it's usually the higher wind objects, because when the wind starts blowing out of the west, they come in quickly. And then the stuff that hunkers down in the water comes in more slowly, like glass balls. Beachcombers know this. So this, I think what we're seeing is, this is a pretty high windage object. So that's the leading edge of the flotsam. So the question is, well, what's next? Well, we know what's the end of it, and that's the stuff that's out in the middle, like glass balls, very low windage stuff. That stuff will be here in probably a year or two. So what's between objects like this and glass balls? And I don't think we know. I I don't know what to expect. There's a famous quotation from 2,000 years ago, is expect the unexpected. Question everything. So that's one reason I came out here, to look at this debris that was collected from a remote beach and see if maybe there's some signal. And I think the signal may be this, but it doesn't talk. It's like a mute person comes into interrogation. How are you gonna? It'll be like interrogating Helen Keller, I guess. I mean,
Let's go ahead and have two more questions. Okay. Daryl had his hand up.
Yeah.
Yeah. This beach that we acquired all this garbage at is not a designated tourist beach for the Macaw tribe. We've had permission to go in there and clean it up and take it out by helicopter. But we've had permission to go in there since 1978, and we've had two major cleanups there this summer, with debris being taken out several weeks ago. But this summer we saw a different type of garbage show up, because when you walk the beaches for 40 years plus, it's always the same garbage, normal. But it's these plastic bottles where the tops have been torn off, with the lid still on the top. And the guys I was cleaning up with, we commented on that. Would you have any explanation for that? Why is this part of the wind flotsam that's coming across? I mean, we've never seen that type of garbage before.
I don't. The question is, when you see plastic bottles, some of them look like they've been shredded, mechanically shredded, maybe as if in a compactor. I do know that the technology advances a lot, but I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. But we are dealing with. I deal with turtle bite marks on plastic all the time. We've still not deciphered how turtles bite plastic. I know in death investigations, bite marks on humans, there are people who specialize in that, and there are whole books on it. But we don't have a book on how to identify the turtle that bit that piece of plastic. It's just waiting to be written.
Okay, one more question, and then we also have Curt's book outside. He'll be signing copies of it and will be available for questions then. Go ahead.
I'm wondering if you or anyone here has any idea why the state of Washington is blocking a baseline study to find the levels of normal background radiation in the marine environment, so that they can know when the wall of radiation, radioactive water, hits us, what the distance between what is normal and what will hit us from Fukushima will be. Why are they blocking it?
Well, I would guess that why is the state of Washington not looking into a background level of radioactivity? It's an excellent question. It should be done. But I would guess that in Gregoire's list of priorities, it probably fell off the table. And when I was at the Japanese consulate, they had no clue that their debris is coming across the Pacific. And they didn't have any comprehension. As far as I can tell, the state agencies are saying, oh, it's coming in a year or two. We'll worry about it in the next biennium, or we'll worry about it in the next budget. And we don't have to worry about it now. But I'm saying that now is the time to get an action plan, because the game has started now. And in 6 more months, we're going to have a lot of stuff, and it'll be too late to get a baseline. So,
okay.
That's
very good. Well, thank you all very much for coming. If you have any additional questions, Curt will be out. Thank you, Eric. Nice job.
Let me stop this real quick here.
Recovery. Thank you. Thanks, Ann.
Yeah, nice job.